Hello, hey, hi everyone. Uh, Welcome to India's second Metabolic Health Conference. My name is Mandar Gadre. I am a metabolic health consultant and a member of DLife.in. DLife is India's oldest and the only award-winning platform. Shashi Iyengar and Anup Singh bring to you this quite historic and scientific feast from India. It's titled Metabolic Therapies. And now let's meet our very special guest for this session, Peter Ballerstedt. He's also known as Don Pedro, the sword father of the Ruminati. So I'm going to request him to also a little bit explain that. Uh, you know, so just a quick intro as we get started. Peter earned his bachelor's and master's at University of Georgia and then his doctorate at the University of Kentucky. He was the forage extension specialist at Oregon State University from 86 to 1992. He has worked in the forage seed industry for quite a few years, member of several national and international scientific societies, participates in related global initiatives, and is a past president of the American Forage and Grassland Council. And his personal experience has really led him to re-examine human diet and health. And I'm very keen to learn from him today. Of course, what he has learned sort of disagrees with the advice generally given in the mainstream for several decades. And Peter has now come to advocate for ruminant animal agriculture and quite the essential role of animal source food in the human diet. And is really great at connecting producers, consumers, researchers across a lot of scientific disciplines, increasing awareness of metabolic health and ruminant animal agriculture's essential role, right? So welcome, Peter. I'm so thrilled to have you here and get a chance to talk to you. Thanks for joining
Thank you,
us.
man. Thank you, Mandar. I'm very happy to be a part of this. It's somewhat amazing to me that a forage agronomist ends up coming after Dr. David Diamond. I mean, this is just quite remarkable. But I think we can draw a thread through everything that has been presented today, will be presented over the next 2 days. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us. So maybe before I sort of start with all the questions, uh, maybe a basic one, but for me and all of our audience, would you sort of briefly describe what is a forage agronomist and what sort of you do out in the field?
Sure. So forage is those parts of plants that are eaten by livestock.
Mhm.
And it could be cut and carry, it could be cut and dried and stored and fed later, it could be pasture. Could be grasses, legumes, other forbs. Some species of ruminants will browse on trees. So basically, anything except the mature seed would be considered forage.
Perfect, perfect. So let me sort of start. How did you initially become interested in researching the nutritional importance of the animal source foods, and how does it sort of connect with your background as you just explained?
Well, so um, I was, my training included a minor in ruminant nutrition, which meant that I had a lot of animal nutrition training. And then I kind of assumed things about what I was hearing about human nutrition. And then, speed forward several years from my graduation. And in 2007, I realized I was a 51-year-old balding, obese pre-diabetic. Okay. And then I started reading the materials that were then available and through lifestyle address those conditions primarily through diet.
Mhm.
My joke is today I'm just balding. um,
Congrats on
it's a
that. Yeah.
it's a really effective lifestyle intervention, but then that led me to re-examine what so many people, all of us have been told about what constitutes a healthy diet and
All right.
where did that come from? Why do we believe that's the case? And then as you get around that very long, you're going to start to hear other messages about environmental impacts or sustainable food systems. And you realize there's a whole lot of poorly food-based belief system involved in those. And so I want the farmers that I was trained to serve, the people, which is everyone. I mean, the people that depend on farmers is all of us. But I want people to understand how important animal source food is in human diet,
Mhm.
how important ruminant animals are for sustainable food systems. And I want people who are producing this food to understand that what they're producing is the health food. Because many people in that community face the same metabolic disorders that I did and others do, the general population. And then I become aware of the fact that this is all malnutrition.
Mm.
And too many people who are doing good work to try to address improving global nutrition will talk about obesity as if it, and they will use words like overnutrition.
Mhm.
They'll, that they're implying that they believe that obesity is the result of overeating or sedentary behavior. You're
Mm.
eating
Mm.
too much, you're not exercising enough. And so then that's kind of in their background as they envision how to address the really pressing needs for improving the quality of humanity's food supply. And I think it's really imperative to get that understood as malnutrition, that
Mhm.
all of the metabolic syndrome and all of those conditions are manifestations of malnutrition, every bit as much as the child that has the bloated belly and the skinny arms and
Mhm.
legs, which is kwashiorkor, protein malnutrition, protein energy malnutrition.
Right.
But these things exist across a spectrum,
Mm.
and and I think we have really good news. I think we have a clear path forward, but we have to get more people to understand that.
Very interesting. So I think we have this paradoxical situation, right? That we are sort of overfed, but also, as you rightly put it, malnourished or undernourished. So I always find it sort of funny that in the modern times with abundant supply of food, one would think that we would be well nourished, but unfortunately, there is a difference between being well nourished and simply being overfed, and which is actually the title of our session today. So if you want to elaborate on maybe that phrase a little more, I mean, you offers refer to protein once on the undernourished side, but also on the sort of the overfed side.
Sure. Well, I've come to understand that there are many oversimplifications in the realm of human nutrition.
Mhm.
And I can contrast that with my background in animal nutrition. And so people who work, so human beings are technically a monogastric animal. We have the one stomach, the acidic stomach. The food that we ingest goes
Mhm.
directly to that, and then the digestive process starts there. Ruminants have four stomachs, so those are sheep and cattle, um, goats, bison, buffalo. There's many others. Their unique contribution is that they can utilize this plant material, which is high in fiber, low in fat,
Mhm.
has relatively low amounts of crude protein, which itself is poor quality protein. And they can take that material and then produce from it highest quality food for human nutrition and development.
Mhm.
So, um, calorie from plants is primarily going to come from sugars and starches. A
Right.
calorie from animal source food is primarily going to come from fat. Well, if I had 100 calories from both food sources, they're
Mhm.
not going to have the same metabolic effect on a human being that eats them.
Right.
And some people could say, well, you know, maybe once upon a time humans could eat more carbohydrates than they can now. Fine. The fact is, we're in the grip of a pandemic of metabolic diseases. And so to rectify that, you can no longer, you know, basically people are intolerant of carbohydrate. So
Mhm.
how are they going to get the energy that they require? And then on top of that, if I had a, you know, 50 grams or 30 grams of protein, and I'm putting air quotes around protein,
Mhm.
from plant source foods and animal source foods, those won't have the same metabolic effect on the human being because they're not equal.
Right.
So protein sources vary tremendously in their quality and our ability to use them and their ability to provide us the essential amino acids that we need. And then there's all the other nutrients that come along with those. So we tend to oversimplify and we just talk about protein and compare plant sources and animal sources and forget about the vitamin A and the zinc and the iron and the essential fatty acids long chain that we require that aren't available or are poorly supplied by plant source foods. And then of course there's anti-nutrient components that
Mhm.
come along with plants. So it's far more complicated than the many of the um, public health messaging has conveyed. And so it's possible for us to eat a lot of calories and not get a lot of nutrients. Let's just think of, oh, I don't know, eating a sack of sugar. You know, get a
Right.
2.5 kilo bag of sugar and you'll get calories. And then from some of the areas that I work in, we talk about food systems and people will talk about caloric yield per hectare. And I'm going, well, okay, that's sugar cane, but is that appropriate for a population that's
True.
metabolically ill? And similarly, people will talk about protein yield from different farming systems. And again, that's just looking at crude protein without looking at its amino acid, utilizable essential amino acid yield, which is a far more important metric. And so all of these things, I want to do the work with those communities, but I also want people to understand that maybe we haven't heard the whole story.
Absolutely, very pertinent points. So if I may sort of summarize quickly, uh, we have to look at not just gram for gram protein comparison, but also a variety of dimensions, right? You mentioned bioavailability, you mentioned the amino acid profile, any anti-nutrients that may come with it, and fourthly, the carbohydrate load that comes with it, right? Because a lot of your plant proteins are going to bring the carbohydrate. So even if not just anti-nutrient, so all these four dimensions. So in that light, I want to ask you. And it's sort of relevant for Indians who are listening to us. See, a lot of times we have a tendency of mixing, the dal and the rice, right? The lentils and rice, and we sort of try to achieve sort of a complete amino acid profile from that. What's your view on it? How well does it work, and what may be the pitfalls of that?
Again, I'm going to lean heavily on the people that I've worked with. Um, but when someone tells me that an 8-year-old boy with unlimited access to rice and lentils could not meet his lysine requirements,
Mhm.
if he had unlimited access,
Mhm.
just the physical gut size, and then of course you'd have to think about everything else they're getting, all the fiber that can cause problems, the phytate that causes problems with, as you alluded to, the micronutrient absorption because it binds certain minerals. Um, and so the point is that some amount of animal source food is essential for proper human development and function. And when we see children not getting, take a step back, the World Health Organization says that children 6 to 36 months of age the best source of the essential nutrients they need for proper development is meat, eggs, dairy, seafood.
Perfect.
And UNICEF says that 60% of global children in that age range do not get meat, eggs, dairy, seafood in their diet.
Wow.
So I say that this is a shame and it's a scandal, and I say that we can address this relatively easily, but we need resources. We need the awareness amongst the governments and the NGOs and private funding. And some of that's taking place. I don't want to act like nothing's going on,
Mm.
but it absolutely confronts some of these other public messaging that's out there. And I'm very sensitive to people's individual choices for any number of reasons. But it can be eggs, it can be dairy, it
Right.
can be fish, it can be other, it doesn't mean that it has to be red meat consumption, although some forms of red meat will be acceptable to populations and others not. That's absolutely appropriate. And
Mm.
in fact, the people that I think are treading on people's traditions and
Mhm.
cultures are those people who are saying we must eat a vegan diet in the name of
Right.
whatever.
Yep.
Because the vegan diet really has never existed anywhere, right? They absolutely no animal source food diet. And we have evidence of something like between a fifth and a quarter of children under 5 years old globally being stunted.
Mhm.
Their brains aren't developing properly because they're not getting these essential nutrients that are best or solely provided by animal source foods. And that's a for the rest of their life decrement, insult, whatever. These people won't be able to achieve their potential because they weren't fed properly. And this has an economic cost. It
Right.
inhibits development of countries. Um, and so there are many factors to this,
Mm.
but there are just some. Maybe I could go through a few things, and you can interrupt at any
Sure.
time.
Please.
Um,
Yeah.
let me switch to somewhere here. Oh, there, right in front of me, the big green one that I could have seen if I looked. Um, let's share. Um, so we don't need to look at that. Um, why are you not moving? Oh, I know why, because I need to click in here and then it'll work, right? Yep.
Mhm.
So humanity is the product of grasslands. Our
Right.
grasslands are actually the most endangered biome in the
Mhm.
world, not the tropical rainforests. And if you think about it, grasslands are converted to cropland.
Yep.
Um, so, but the good news is that ruminant animal agriculture is going to be part of the solution to many of the problems that we face. Um, and I want people to understand, to value their own health more. Um, when you improve your health, you are improving the world, and maybe it's the most practical thing you can do as an individual. You will have an impact to your community, your family, your business or your place of employment, all of those things.
Absolutely.
Whenever we talk about environments or ecosystems, we need to understand that these are incredibly complex systems, and we tend to just reduce them down to some um, oversimplified conception. So you look at a landscape like this, and you're not going to grow many crops on that landscape, but you can grow grass. You can then harvest that grass with ruminants and have the benefit of those animals in your food system. And in fact, livestock in food systems are essential. We
Mhm.
cannot have sustainable food systems without livestock in general or ruminant animals in particular. And again, without sustainable food systems, we don't have sustainable societies. food security is national security. So I just learned yesterday morning that India is the largest producer of milk.
Mhm.
And since at the time of independence, you were not sufficient in dairy, but
Yeah.
you have become that. So these are enormously important questions for our national sustainability, if you will. Um, this is one that I got from Dr. Holder. You cannot replace food production with food processors. And so many of these substitute products that are marketed
Mm.
are produced by processing some commodity.
True.
And so if we think about it, we take that commodity, which was perhaps already human edible, but now we're going to put it through a process. Well, all of those result in less coming out than went in, right? They're not
Yep.
100% efficient. And then we understand that a lot of this processing lowers nutritive value. So we're
Right.
actually decreasing humanity's food supply by these high ultra processed foods that are now in the United States. I don't know about India, so forgive me, but in United States, one estimate has 60% of the calories in adult Americans' diet coming from ultra processed foods. And for children and adolescents, it's 70%.
Oh.
So this is versus what we have here, where this animal is grazing is converting a resource we can't utilize directly. So they're increasing humanity's food supply. Um, and then just to throw out little things like this, that uh, this whole question of environmental impacts
Mhm.
has been oversimplified and misstated. But this study released last year estimated comparable greenhouse gas emissions from animals in wildlife and livestock dominated savannas. So, savanna is a grassland with
Mhm.
some kind of tree component to it, and you're going to end up with animals grazing that, whether it's wildlife or livestock. It's a requirement for the health of the grassland and that
Absolutely.
ecosystem. And you're going to have but the way we've spoken about things accepts this assumption that there would be zero emissions if there weren't livestock there.
Mhm.
And clearly that's not the case.
True.
Globally, like 96% of the feed that's consumed by domesticated livestock, ruminants, is not human edible. 9.6.
Mhm.
So there is no feed food competition,
Yep.
much as people will say. This quote from the former director of the International Livestock Research Institute. But everyone's entitled to their own opinions. No one is entitled to their own facts. And so people in, some countries can entertain whatever but to inflict those through various means on other parts of the world is a form of imperialism that I don't think is recognized enough. Many people would consider these foods, these 9 foods, as good quality protein sources, and I've
Mhm.
heard people talk about them that way. But when you apply even the PDCAS, protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, that's a
Mhm.
mouthful. There'll be a test at later. I want you. Um, the almonds and the sunflower seeds and the peanut butter don't qualify as a good source of protein. And then if you apply the more current DIAS, digestible indispensable
Mhm.
amino acid score, only chickpeas qualify as a good protein claim for those
Mhm.
foods. Now, if we added some dairy to that meal, if we added some poultry to that meal, if we added some
Mhm.
eggs or fish to that meal, we could easily get that deficiency in the indispensable amino acids corrected, because those foods are much higher and have enough to offset the deficiency. So, but again, we haven't begun to get this into our conversation. Here's another, this is from the US, so forgive me if this is not applicable, but the dietary guidelines uses this phrase ounce equivalent. So an ounce is like what, 28 grams of meat, or 28 grams per ounce. So this is the idea that this amount of food would give you the same amount of protein as an ounce of meat.
Mhm.
Okay, so one cooked egg, or 70 grams of red kidney beans, or 15 grams of peanut butter, 56 grams of tofu, 14 grams of mixed nuts. Okay, so people went and started, what's that based on? And they
Mm.
started saying things like this in their paper: the metabolic equivalency of these very protein food sources has not been established, that the basis for considering these protein food sources to be equivalent is unclear. And upon inspection, these equivalent protein food sources do not appear to be equivalent in any respect. Okay. Another author basically said, this gets very complicated, maybe hard to get our minds around all this. It's just much simpler if we utilize muscle foods or other animal source foods compared to the plant-based sources of protein.
Right.
So this is the quote: one can be fed but not nourished. And
Mm.
as you and I would agree, I think we're overfed. And maybe that, maybe what we eat influences how much we eat.
Absolutely.
That we're, especially when we're on these processed cereal rations, which are cereals. Cereals are the single largest source of crude protein in humanity's food supply.
Mm.
The cereals is bigger than all animal source foods combined. And wheat is the single largest source of crude protein in humanity's food supply. And they're poor quality protein. They're deficient in lysine. They come
Yeah.
along with other anti-nutrient components. When we process them, we make them even less nutritious.
Mhm.
And so so it's not hard to imagine that people are eating more of these foods for any number of reasons, one being to try to overcome those deficiencies. And flourishing requires nourishing. From Dr. Ead's book, um,
Mhm.
she used this quote that mental power cannot be got from ill-fed brains, and I've talked about these issues already.
Right.
Um, and I mentioned this idea that there are many manifestations of malnutrition, and we need to broaden our conception of malnutrition so we can address the problem. It's interesting to see people start talking about subclinical kwashiorkor,
Mhm.
that many manifestations of essential amino acid deficiency. But we have more than 3 billion human beings today that are malnourished.
Mm.
More than 3 billion out of a total of around 8 billion. Again, undernutrition is not synonymous with caloric deficit. Another way of saying overfed but undernourished. And
Absolutely.
protein energy malnutrition is a lethal form, especially for children. Um, People want to talk about sustainability issues. In the US, 90% of our healthcare expenditures, which is $4.1 trillion, is due to these chronic diseases. A significant portion of those are malnutrition. Globally, $47 trillion by 2030 is the estimated cost.
Right.
And if you start thinking about limited healthcare resources, would it not be better to have those resources able to address infectious disease or trauma care rather than malnutrition issues that we could address through other means? So humanity's existential crisis then is insufficient animal source food. And this flies in the face of many messages. So these are just some resources that I want people to have available or know they're already available. I want people to know that they exist. This one issue of Animal Frontiers, Foods of Animal Origin, a prescription for global health, want people to know about that. Then subsequent to that, there was the result of some of a Congress that was held in Ireland in October of 22, the societal role of meat. There's a web source that's available for free called Animal Source Foods and Ethical, Sustainable, and Healthy Diets. And then there's some areas in research centers in 2 universities if people are interested in issues of animal agriculture and environmental issues. Dublin Declaration of Scientists on the Societal Role of Meat. There's still an opportunity for scientists to review. Everyone can review this document. Scientists who review it and support it are encouraged to sign it, and they're still collecting signatures. I have a reading list of books that I find of interest. This is available. It's a US Amazon link, so I don't know how that's going to translate. Anybody who's interested, we'll see what we can do. I'm available on social media, and then these presentation materials are available now at the link that's shown there on the screen. And I welcome correspondence to talk about these things, and maybe this kind of quick run through those addressed some of the issues that were on the list of questions, but certainly happy to go through more in greater depth as time permits.
Right. No, thanks for this. It's quite helpful. I have sort of 2 questions that, we also keep hearing about. So one is that, people sort of point to bulls and elephants and, gorillas, and, they will say, hey, they are building muscles eating grass. Why do you need to eat eggs or, dairy items or fish and meat? So people don't quite appreciate what is happening in the digestive system of these animals. So maybe your quick take on that, please.
Yeah, we do not have the same digestive systems. And there's some very interesting work that makes the point, it reinforces the points that have been made already and that I've said in our conversation. But the point still is that we physically cannot utilize the feed resources that those animals can. And so, yeah, pointing to them and saying, well, they're big and strong and they only eat plants, so we could be big and strong. And yeah, it's not, you're not comparing apples to, apples. You're comparing apples to
Right.
oranges.
Absolutely. The other question, is that people sort of sometimes misunderstand, how the use of grasslands versus croplands becomes, right? I mean, we have this notion that, I have to first grow these crops and then feed some of that, even if it is other than the grain part, right, to the ruminants and then eat them. So then, naturally, some of them ask that, why go through all this trouble? Let's just skip that level and eat the plants, right? So, but if I may check with you the statistics, but what I heard is grassland, the amount of grassland in the world is, I think, 2.5 times, 2.5 times the amount of cropland, right? And we have to do a lot of things to make a land arable, right? So that argument of those trophic levels doesn't quite hold. So how do you look at it?
Well, back to the idea that a calorie is not a calorie, right? So they're looking at the calories saying, well, okay, you're feeding the animal and so you lose some calories in there, and then, well, but it's not fair to compare calories to calories, number one. Number two, the vast majority of the Earth's surface is not agricultural land. The majority of the agricultural land is not suitable for cultivation. So we can use the example of a soccer field. and we can, or I'm sorry, football. So um, the if we imagine that the Earth's land surface is within the boundaries of a soccer field,
Mm-hmm.
then the agricultural land would only go from the one goal line, would not even reach the center circle.
Mm-hmm.
It would be short by several meters. Then, if
Mm-hmm.
you imagine arable is the term that we use to describe land that can be cultivated to
Right.
produce crops, that would only go from the goal line within the penalty area to the penalty spot, just to visualize the difference. And as a friend of mine said, yeah, and the spot's getting closer and the goalie's getting nervous because
Yeah.
we're losing the arable land, this
Yep.
most precious resource, through any number of things.
Mm-hmm.
Then also on top of that, we need to acknowledge that this is buying into the either or, right? You can either
Mm-hmm.
have animal agriculture or you can have plant agriculture. No, you cannot have either one without the other. The vast majority of the biomass that agriculture produces is not human edible.
Mm-hmm.
So if I grow a crop of wheat, over half of that biomass, the above ground portion, is not human edible. One estimate from Europe said that for every kilo of vegan food produced, 4 to 5 kilos of inedible biomass are produced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have a whole lot of almonds produced in the nuts produced in California. And so my line is you can't get milk from almonds, but you can get it from the almond hulls because they
Mm-hmm.
feed a lot of those hulls as a byproduct feed to the dairy cattle in California. Um, and then on top of that, there's yet one more misunderstanding, and that is within any 1 year you can have, or crop cycle, you can have livestock on that land and still produce a crop that year or cycle. So for example, a lot of corn is produced in Nebraska, maize.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of biomass. Again, over half of that biomass isn't human edible. So they harvest the grain, and then you have that fodder left that then cattle will graze on during that fall and early winter period.
Mm-hmm.
Further south in the Great Plains, you have a lot of winter wheat grown. And during that winter, early spring period, you'll have cattle grazing that. And then the farmer can say, do I want to produce a wheat crop or do I want to just graze it out? And if they pull the animals off at the right time before that seed head elongates up in the tiller and gets damaged, you could still get a wheat crop from that field. Where I live in Western Oregon, we produce a lot of grass seed, and you'll see sheep grazing those seed fields in the wintertime to maintain to keep that biomass low so that you get a better seed yield. So now we've got this kind of integration, and then we have research in various parts of the world that's looking at integrating livestock into cropping systems and finding that they get more food produced from the same land area with the same inputs, and then they get benefits to the soil because globally we're seeing still a problem with soil erosion and degradation of those soils. And so a lot of people are looking at how to protect that soil from erosion, and grazing animals is one of the key parts of that soil health regenerative agriculture that many people are hearing.
Got it. We have maybe a couple of minutes. So one last question I wanted to ask you was, around micronutrients. So people seem to have an impression that, you sort of need, vegetables and fruits, and somehow these are always clubbed together, which I find a little bit weird. But anyhow, so people think that they need those for certain micronutrients, and you won't be able to get those from, animal source food. So maybe your quick take on that, please.
I think that people again are confusing seeing, for example, iron in green leafy plants
Mhm.
and confusing that with heme iron.
Mm.
And there's a very big difference between those two in terms of our ability to use them and potential impacts from consuming too much iron from some of these other sources where our bioregulatory systems don't respond to elemental non-heme iron the same way. So vegetables, again, good point. And then we also have a lot of immature seeds that are called a vegetable. So we, all of that, so, okay. I think that if people can tolerate them, and people are frequently surprised by how better they feel when they eliminate some foods from their diet that they had been taught were healthy or what have you. So I want people to feel free to follow diets heavier in animal source foods. And I know of many people who are exclusively animal source foods for any number of reasons, and they see improvement in their health. But if you can tolerate the plant source foods and you like the taste and you like the variety, then by all means enjoy them. But I don't think there's anything that says that they're a requirement to provide the essential nutrients that humans require.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that elaboration. I think we are coming close at the end of the session. So may I request Shashi and Anup to join, if you are there, please. And we can get everybody on the spotlight, please. Yeah.
Good night, everyone. It's late for you.
Almost reaching.
It's already been a long day and it's not even noon here.
Artik, Yogita, get me in. Spotlight me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's good. So, Peter, thank you very much for accepting the invite. And I think your talk has been very valuable, especially in the context of protein. I think protein malnutrition is very wide in India, where in our plate, we see 70 to 80% components are grains, actually. And in this country, people fear protein. People do not know what protein is, first of all. And every disease which happens are blamed on protein, which they don't have. This is the paradoxical nature of India. And I think in this context, your topic has been very, very important in making us realize that which kind of proteins are very important for us. And from your agronomist point of view also, it's going to be very useful. Thank you for sharing with us your knowledge, and thank you for spending 45 minutes with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor, and
You-
I welcome the opportunity to collaborate or introduce or share sources.
Yeah, we'll surely do it. We'll surely do it.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Peter.
much. Thanks, Peter. Have a good day. Get Ira Sai in. Yogita, get Ira in.
Yes, sir. So from here, I'm ending.
Yeah. Get Ira in. Fine. So yeah, you can conclude the session for today.
Yeah, I think it's been a great day, and I've been listening to most of the sessions, except I think one that I missed because of the power outage. But what a day it has been, and fantastic participation from everybody, the team. And I've been getting a lot of good feedback from people who've been watching online. And I think that's very encouraging for us to have because of, such a niche topic that we are covering this time. So I hope tomorrow is a bigger and a better and a more interesting day for all of us and for the viewers as well. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined. Thank you, Anup. Thank you, Shashi. And whatever you want to say, please go ahead.
First, thank you. And I think we had everything went smooth today. Thank you, Imagika team. So today's session was very, very smooth. And we are going to have more interesting topic for the next 2 days also. Anup,
Thank you everyone, including audience, the team, and that's it. Good night for today.
I
good
think
night.
Ranveer's participation added a bit of
Yeah.
jazz to the entire show, and so nice of him to come over and encourage us and talk about his story. So Ranveer, if you're hearing this, thank you for coming over. Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye.
You can stop the live stream now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aarti.
So I'm putting the end stream today.